Hello and welcome to Scarves Around the Funnel, the podcast dedicated to Heart of Midlothian Football Club. It's Masters Week, but what exactly does that have to do with Hearts? Let me try and explain, if you wouldn't mind. In the new Amazon documentary about Rory McIlroy called The Masters Wait, Rory explains that after missing a short putt on the 18th in regulation on the Sunday, his head was all over the place with nothing but negativity. Having held a four-shot lead at the turn in the final round, he was now facing a playoff with Justin Rose to decide who won the green jacket at Augusta. The momentum was very much not with him. That's when Harry Diamond, Rory's caddy, stepped in. Oi, boss, would we have taken this scenario at the start of the week? A playoff to win the Masters, said Harry. Of course we would, said Rory. Well then, now go and win the fucking thing. And with that, Rory, in the documentary, said his mood totally changed. Positivity replaced negativity. Can't change the past, can still influence the future. Now, let's apply that same scenario to Heart of Midlothian. And let me ask all of you roughly the same question. Would you have taken this current scenario, where Hearts are top of the league by a point with only 6 games of the season remaining, if you'd been offered it back in August? And let me answer, please, on behalf of all of you. Of course we would. Rewriting history doesn't just apply to our club. Yes, we would have wanted those recent games at St Mirren, at Livingston, and at Kilmarnock. We would have wanted a do-over. But for that to be the case, Rangers and Celtic fans would also get a mulligan. Russell Martin and Wilfred Nancy wouldn't be within 100 miles of their respective grounds. We are where we are. It's in our own hands. Now let's go and win this fucking thing. Good evening, Scott McIntosh.
Evening, Mark, and a very happy birthday to you as well. So thanks for taking the time at your birthday to record with me today.
Looking forward to this. I wanted to start with that positivity and I wanted to start with that message, having watched the Rory documentary. I was as annoyed as anybody else, and I did the on the whistle straight after the game. And we're going to talk today about what happened in the last half hour, but we're also going to accentuate what we did right and what we need to do between now and the end of the season. We're also going to review the post-split fixtures and we'll preview Motherwell at home. And Colin Chisholm is going to return to Tynecastle pre-game to sing the Hearts song at the request of Derek McInnes. It's been 2 or 3 weeks since you were last with us. Good to see you back healthy again. Hearts haven't really helped our mood, have they?
No, I mean, look, Sunday was an interesting game. I thought in many ways we went back to that sort of the fixture had more of that basketball feel that I think a lot of our games earlier on in the season had. I think the last half an hour is where it deviates, mostly down to what Livy do and what we don't do. But aye, there was aspects of Sunday that were still positive. I think
hmm
having Shanklin back was a huge positive, although I think he was blown his backside in the last half an hour, and I
Wasn't the
think
only one.
having a viable alternative on the bench would have been quite good on a day
Yeah.
like Sunday. But yeah, there's still plenty of positives. I think I, I understand the frustration with, a lot of the fans. I think we talked about this a few weeks ago about trying to build a bit of a buffer. Like the ideal scenario would have been being probably at least 6 points ahead going into the split and just giving yourself that little bit of wiggle room for error. Whereas now we find ourselves in the same situation as Rangers and Celtic, which is there's very little margin for error now for all three sides. But this isn't, I think what a lot of people have sort of fell in the trap of doing is looking at where we are now to our rivals compared to where we were back around September, October, when we had that really strong start to the season and Rangers or Celtic were very indifferent to below average. I think if you actually look at how the league has panned out post December, there's been two or three other occasions where Celtic or Rangers have been within a point or two of us, and we've managed to sort of still steady the ship after that. There was also that spell that we had back in November where, we lose to Aberdeen, we draw away to Motherwell, we draw at home to Killie. So we have had a significant dip before. And I appreciate some people will say, well, we had these results against Wilfred Nancy and Russell Martin and that. I still think our top six record still has a lot to offer us hope for. And also, I think that's Derek McInnes's bread and butter with how he gets this Hearts team set up. I think they're set up to make the most out of the small possession we have in these fixtures compared to trying to do a lot more with 60-70% of the ball like you've seen at home to Dundee, away to St Mirren, away to Killie, for example. So I think there's still a lot to be positive for. There's six cup finals now to look forward to. I hope they're not all cup finals. I think for me the ideal scenario would be now wrapping the league up at home to Falkirk and getting a Guardiola at Parkhead on the last day of the season. I think that would probably be the dream scenario. But look, we know that the way the seasons went for all three of the clubs, I think there's still going to be a few twists and turns and moments of frustration still coming round the corner for everyone. So I think everyone's just got to try and stick in with it. There's only a few weeks left now, and we're still potentially on course to having a real defining season for the club.
The reason I mentioned that rewriting history doesn't just apply to our club, we can't just say, oh, if we'd won at Kilmarnock, if we'd won at St Mirren, if we'd
Mm.
taken more than a point at Livingston, because it applies to everybody else. Rangers were 2-0 up against Celtic at half time, should have been 4 or 5 up. Do you think they want to rewrite history in the second half? Of course they do. Look at
Aye.
Celtic at Dundee United on Tayside for most of the season as well. Look at
Aye.
Rangers at Motherwell at Easter Road. I understand why we do what we do, but you do have to see it from a bigger
Yeah.
perspective. We can't just pick and choose the games we want to change. Others have got to have that opportunity as well. It
There's
is what it is.
there's the other two acknowledgements as well. Firstly being Celtic have regressed quite a bit
They
behind
have.
from
Yeah.
last season. I think in a standard season, I think where we are just now, we would be fighting with Rangers for second spot. I think Rangers are only a couple of points better off than where they were last season. So I don't think Rangers have made great strides, but I think Celtic have certainly regressed, and I think in a standard season we'd be a decent amount off top and probably fighting out for second spot. And again, this is something I've been at pains to say for a while now, without trying to belittle the achievements of the team. I do think the team have punched well above their weight this season, and I include the manager in that. I think in terms of what the manager's done to improve the consistency, a performance of some players who had been around the club for the last 4, 5, 6 years is something that we should take encouragement from. And I think that's something we need to remind ourselves of when we have these blips and these sorts of potholes. I think we've got to acknowledge that this is a squad that will only get better in time, season after season. I think the money that we hopefully recoup this year on one or two players will then go towards bringing in players of a better caliber, and then hopefully year on year we continue to improve on that. So I think we've got to try and block out the outside noise, because I think a lot of the outside noise is focusing on this being our one and only chance. I don't think that's the case. That's always been my feeling all year long, and I still feel that way. I think the rebuild that Celtic have in front of them this summer, I think is too much for them to motor on ahead of other teams next season. When you consider that there's a manager and possibly a director of football to bring in as well. So still plenty to be positive about, albeit I can understand the frustrations Sunday. I felt them just as much as anyone. And I think walking out the stadium, it's as quiet I've heard the Hearts crowd. There wasn't a lot of, you know, there wasn't that instant sort of autopsy of the game and instant analysis. I think most people were just quite quiet walking out, and were just quite sort of obviously disappointed that we couldn't get the 3 points and just sort of, lengthen that gap on Rangers. But another opportunity to do that on Saturday. We are now the ones playing on the Saturday rather than Sunday, and that's an opportunity for us to put the pressure on Rangers by getting a result against Motherwell and seeing how Rangers maybe perform away to Falkirk.
22nd of February. Rangers went to Livingston. Felt like we did afterwards, following a 2-2 draw. but they bounced back pretty quickly, and that was after being 2-0 up against Celtic and not getting all 3 points. Plenty to talk about today. You're listening to Scarves Around the Funnel, sponsored by Forrest Hepburn and McDonald Signs. Okay, let's not beat around the bush here. This ain't all going to be kumbaya and chanting positivity around the campfire. That last half hour was unacceptable on Saturday. So let's find out. Let's try and analyse now that the dust has settled why the last half hour was as it was, why our away form has gone to shit, but also what we did well and very well in that game, which could have seen us out of sight before, whether it was a misplaced pass by Halkett, whether it was Chesnikov on his heels and not ready for it, or whatever it was. The goals we conceded were horrible. But we're going to start at the beginning. And as I said on the whistle, there's not too many people that had that much of a negative stance following the team selection. 4-4-2 is kind of what we wanted. We weren't sure what we are going to do at right midfield. He picked an attacking front four. It was a 4-2-4 going forward. Strong bench. Didn't hear too many gripes before the game, did you?
No, no, I think most people were quite happy to see it. I mean, it was in effect a 4-2-4, wasn't it? I think where the initial concern comes from is what you don't think about when you see that team because you're so intent in thinking, right, we're playing bottom of the league. We have to go out and stamp our authority. We need to go out there and try and get a comfortable victory. I think we all focused on that 4-2-4 in terms of when we were in possession and how many options that was going to give us. And I think you saw for the best part of 50 to 60 minutes what that did offer us. I think the problem was what we didn't consider was how Livingston were going to shape up and then how that was going to affect us out of possession. And it was almost like a box midfield Livingston had. They had almost like 4 men in midfield, two sitting that were enticing Leonard and Devlin to the ball. And then you had two more advanced midfielders. And you could see with the first goal, McAtee just gets pulled all over the place because I think our fullbacks don't know what to do in that scenario because literally the middle of the park was just it was vacant at times during that first sort of hour or so. So I think that was the problem. I think there was good intent from the formation. And I think it showed that we were going out there to try and get the win and try and get a comfortable victory. But unfortunately, and fair play to Livingston, when they got their chances, they did take them on the most point. They acquitted themselves pretty well, and when they were able to transition, we looked a bit ragged, which isn't something you'd say about Hearts much this season, but certainly at points on Sunday that was certainly the case.
Simplifying things, poor start, really good response, shite finish. What were the positives and what were the negatives in that game?
I think first half, I thought we were moving the ball really quickly. I thought we were there were options. Like I say, having that 4-2-4 meant that there was always, when Leonard and Devlin had the ball, there tended to be options ahead of them. I thought Kingsley and McAtee were doing a good job of supporting the wide players as well. So I think from that point of view, we always had plenty of players in their area or pressing the game well as well and forcing them into either going long or into making errors. So I think there was a lot to admire about us from about the 10th minute onwards on to when we got our second goal. Uh, so there's plenty to take heart from that. I think having Shanklin back's a huge bonus. And you could see that. I thought for an hour on Sunday, sorry, he was really good. I thought Braga was good as well. I thought Kazidis looked more lively because he had somebody to bounce the ball off of. I think we've talked about Kabori at length over the last few weeks, and this is where that Kabori to me just doesn't fit in with inverted wingers because I think inverted wingers want forwards that they can play the ball off of. They want to interchange with the strikers. I think Kabori would be better in a setup where he's got two wide men that just want to hit the byline and just cross the ball in, and he can just, be in between the posts, try to snuff out chances. So having Shanklin back, you could see the difference in the balance of the team and the setup of us going forward. Chesnikov gave us that balance on the right side as well, albeit at the same time having quite a mixed bag as a performance. but certainly there was a lot to take from that. And I think if we can apply that formation to our remaining games whilst having Benny and the core in the midfield, I still think that's the right way forward for the team in terms of having a go at it.
And now the negatives. Before you give your opinion, I want to give you some stats. And I'm going to compare the Livy Rangers 2-2 game with the Livy Hearts 2-2 game at the weekend. And I'm going to compare specifically the second half. Now, we saw two sides of Hearts in the second half. It was the first 15 minutes and the last half hour. But combined, Hearts had two big chances and an expected goals of 0.81. In the second half against Livingston, Rangers had three big chances and an expected goals of 1.45. What about big chances relating to shots? Well, Hearts had six shots in the second half. Livy had seven. Rangers had 16. Livy had two. For Livingston to have more of an expected goals at 1.26 than Hearts, and I'm not a big XG proponent, but I think it can be used to illustrate where things haven't gone right. Rangers just didn't care about consequences. They felt if they just pushed forward and it was rampant, and they didn't win somehow, but they should have done. We didn't win somehow, but we should have done because we should have been out of sight. But the bigger concern here, Scotty, is in the last 20 minutes, the side that was more likely to score in our game looked like it was Livingston. So what's happened?
Yes. So I think first,
Why did this do? Why did
so I
this
think
happen?
first and foremost, there needs to be context to the stats comparison.
Sure, provide that.
So for what I recall for that Livingston game, Livingston went 2-0 up reasonably early on in the second half, and then they went down to 10 men roughly around the 60th minute. So Rangers had the advantage of having an extra man, but also the urgency that comes with being 2-0 down. So naturally, I would fully expect Rangers XG to far outweigh ours given those variables. I think with Hearts, they tried to be they were too cautious, they were too sensible. I would have liked to have seen us go to the bottom of the league team and ask more questions with crosses into the box. Derek McInnes has talked at length throughout the season as to that's how he wants his Hearts team to play. And I felt that Saturday would have been a good example of that. Just even if you're throwing it in from deeper areas of the park, just, doing that, getting Shanklin and Braga on top of their centre halves and just asking the question and just seeing if something falls to a Hearts player. But they just didn't do enough of that, or they basically didn't do it at all. I think the passage he played that leads to the Leonard red card, that said it all. I mean, I stood there and actually says that's a deserved red card purely just for how we played in that 2 or 3 minute spell leading up to it. We had so many chances to just get the ball into the box. We didn't take it. I feel so. This isn't Mark Leonard's fault per se, but I feel with Mark Leonard and the team, our centre halves are taking fewer chances to get the ball out wide quicker, and they're just giving the ball to Leonard, and it's slowing the game down, and it isn't helping us. That isn't just Sunday. I thought there was large spells of the game at home to Dundee where Leonard and Devlin were coming deep for the ball. They weren't seeing a pass, so they were then passing it back to the centre halves. The centre halves were then going long, and the problem we then had was our two centre halves were so deep at the point in which we go direct that there's nobody there to fight for those second balls. So it's clear that we're missing Magnuson. I think Magnuson was performing that role pretty well since the turn of the year. So that's something that McInnes is probably going to have to think about in terms of the next 6 games, is whether they get a third man in the middle of the park and they try and play somebody a bit more advanced, whether that's bringing McAtee up the right back and playing him in a more advanced role, or bringing somebody like Blair Spittle in off the bench. But they're going to have to consider it, because just now I feel like the Livingston game, the last half an hour, would have been a prime example to do that, which would have been go long, get a third midfielder central, and just have somebody there just motoring about outside the box, just waiting for any knockdowns. Let Shanklin and Braga make it hard for their centre halves to get, a clear head away, and just feed off the scraps of that. But for some reason we went. I think what triggers Hearts fans is the last half an hour was very much what we've been accustomed to with some of our previous managers down the
Yeah.
years. And I think that was where the concern and the frustration probably comes from. Uh, but I understand it. I understand that maybe McInnes felt we had half an hour and we had plenty of time to nick a goal. But you're right. I spent most of that last 15, 20 minutes thinking there's only one team that are going to win this and it's going to be Livy. So I think when you look at it that way, it is a disappointment. But again, I can understand why it's happened. I just think we might talk about the subs. The subs,
Oh, we will.
bem, the subs bemused me. If I'm
The timing
totally
of them
honest,
or the actual subs?
I think a bit of both. I think the timing and the subs that we made. Uh, but again, I think the biggest disappointment in the last half an hour was how we approached it. If you take away the substitution side of it, I felt we needed to just throw more balls in the box into the mixer and just feed off second balls and just make it a bit more of a battle. It was just a bit too safe and a bit too technical from the team. And I don't know whether Halkett was affected by the second goal, but I felt again that last half an hour it was just responsibility was just being handed over to Leonard and Devlin, and the game was then slowing down. Whereas I felt as if in the first half or first hour, Halkett and McCart seemed quite happy to get the ball out to, if not the wingers, at least the fullbacks
Yeah.
higher up the park. But second half, that really stopped after we lost the second goal. And again, that could be a consequence of how we lost that second goal, and the players maybe got a bit of a fright for that. But they'll need to make sure that gets knocked on the head because I can deal with us losing games, but I don't want to see us go back into bad habits that we've had under previous managers. I want us to stay on course with what served us well the majority of the season.
We're speaking about this game in isolation. Right? This is just about the Livy game. This isn't criticizing based on previous things. This is just criticism of that last half hour. So who should get the majority of the criticism? Is it the manager or is it the players? If it's a bit of both, who is it more? Because the manager needs to take all the responsibility for the subs and not to change it until the 77th minute. When, as you say, clearly some of them are blown out their arse and others aren't even blowing. I mean, Chesnikov went missing and could have gone off at half time. So he's not seen that. He's definitely to blame for the substitutions. But who's to blame? Because you see Shanklin having a go at McCart, having a go at Halkett, saying, "Get it forward, for fuck's, get it forward." This is towards the end. There's a little bit of on the field leadership, but is it players? Is it manager? What's happened? Who's to blame in that second half for that last half hour?
I think there's a bit of both. I think maybe the urgency would have came if different substitutions had been made. You know, if we'd thrown a third forward on, for example, does that give the centre halves the almost the license to say, right, we'll just go long and we'll just try and bring a bit of chaos to the game. So I think the substitutions can have an effect on maybe the mindset of the players, but I do feel like it was poor for some of the players. I thought McCart and Halkett went into their shell somewhat in the second half. Obviously, Kingsley was struggling. He was going to have to come off at some stage, and that's understandable. Again, we touched on it earlier. In better circumstances, we would have brought off Shankland at some stage. I think the ideal scenario would have been after getting the second goal, maybe getting a third, and then being able to make one or two changes like that.
Hmm.
But we just weren't able to do it. And I do think McInnes did struggle a little bit. I don't know whether in the back of his mind he thought we'll be in this position and we'll be able to do A, B, and C with the guys that are out there. And because it didn't work out that way, I felt as if we kind of waited to see what Livingston were going to do before we made our switches. And to be fair to McInnes, he's done that a few times this season and he's done that well.
He
But
has, yes.
Sunday wasn't an example of that,
No.
unfortunately. It was an example of his reactive changes just not working. And again, I don't think any of the changes brought any sort of positivity to proceedings at all. I felt like by the time Kurjota came on, we weren't getting the ball out wide. This is when we'd started to just sort of, go into that sort of horseshoe death with the two sitting midfielders and the
The
centre backs
horseshoe of death.
just touching the ball. Like I didn't want to even look at the stats to see how many touches McCart and Halkett had and Leonard in that last half hour. So Kurjota didn't really get involved much in the game. He then makes his subway Altena, where he then shifts McAtee in centrally, and I've look, he has to take a decent portion of the blame, but I think the players do as well. I think the players are experienced enough to be able to identify what was required in that game as well. And like you say, if there's a captain on the park demanding the ball quicker, they should be doing it. But like I say, I think the centre halves got spooked a little bit with how we lost the second goal.
The buffer's pretty much gone. Where does it leave us?
Because it was a draw away to the bottom side, and because of how we've performed in our last sort of 3 or 4 away games, I think that's what's probably bringing the most anxiety to the fans, rather than just one isolated 2-all scoreline away from home. So I think it's an accumulation of how we've been playing away from home now over the last sort of month or two, probably since the Dundee United game. That was what, end of January, I think, start of February.
Yeah, end of January.
So yeah, I think there's an anxiety that our away woes and the type of away woes that McInnes experienced for a couple of years at Kilmarnock have started creeping back in. And obviously because, we know in the last 6 games we're going to be playing 3 of them at least away from home, there's obviously an anxiety around that, I think, more than anything else. But I still think our top 6 record should give us a lot to be positive for. And I think there's a huge pressure on Celtic and Rangers. And look, this, like I said at the start of the episode, this isn't the first time that Celtic or Rangers have got within a point or 3 of us. But what's happened previously is they haven't been able to then make it count. So the last time, to be fair, one of the times that Celtic got within touching distance of us, O'Neill leaves and Nancy comes in. So obviously that's something that works in our favour. With Rangers have got there once or twice, but then they've decided to draw games. And this is the other thing, our away form's not been great as of late, but neither have Rangers and Celtic. So something's got to give here in terms of the away form, because all 3 clubs have struggled for away form over the last couple of months. So I still think it's all there to play for. I still think we've got the 2 best forwards in the country currently on form.
Definitely.
So I think
Not,
that
yeah.
gives us, a lot to be positive about, because if it's a game of few chances, we've hopefully got the 2 most informed players in terms of taking them. And then it's up to Rangers and Celtic. They can focus on where they think our weaknesses are. We've just got to focus on what's positive about this team, what they've done well up to this stage, and then what we can do to try and help foster that with the atmosphere inside the ground as well. And I do think Saturday you'll see an improvement in terms of that. I think you'll see a change in terms of potentially how cavalier we are. That I think we were cavalier against Livingston, and there was good intentions behind that. I think you'll probably see McInnes maybe tweak it a bit. Benny coming in will naturally do that anyway, because Benny will just sit and he'll just cover, and he'll maybe allow Devlin to maybe be the more advanced forward, maybe trying to counter press the opposition. But yeah, I think that red card for Leonard might turn out to be not a bad thing in terms
Agree.
of we can stick with the 4-2-4, but there's just more of a grounded version of the 2 central midfielders. Like I say, I think Leonard's done reasonably well since he's come in, but sometimes it's just about getting balance, and Benny and Cammy have gave us that within that 4-2-4 formation earlier in the year.
Yeah, I noticed, I think over the past 24 hours, Barry Anderson at the Evening News had written a piece about the Hearts' issues down the right-hand side. So sticking with a 4-2-4 against Motherwell this weekend, I don't think we'd complain about that if it was Benny and Cammy in the middle. But there's no way Chesnikov's going to start down the right-hand side. So is it Kajota or who is it? Plenty more still to come as we preview the Motherwell game. But coming up after this, we will look at the top 6 post-split fixtures. You're listening to Scarves Around the Funnel, sponsored by Forrest, Hepburn and McDonald Signs, who've been offering creative sign and print solutions since the 1950s. We say a warm welcome back to Scarves Around the Funnel. On loan from Deal or No Deal, the banker is back. Now, you have been very dismissive to the banker this season. I don't think you've accepted any of his offers.
No,
So
no.
he And I get that. And most of the kind of dismissive nature on your behalf has come because you think Hearts could do better. All for that. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to offer you the same results in the last 6 games that Hearts have had in the previous fixture between Motherwell and Hearts, between Falkirk and Hearts, between Rangers and Hearts, between Celtic and Hearts, and between Hibs at Hearts at that venue. So it
Okay.
works out at 11 points for Hearts because it would be 2 draws, home and away against Motherwell. It would be defeat at Easter Road. It would be victory at Celtic Park and victory against Rangers at Tynecastle and victory against Falkirk at Tynecastle. That would take us from currently being on 67 points. 2 draws against Motherwell is 2 points. A win against Rangers is up to 5. A win against Celtic is up to 8. A win against Falkirk is up to 11 points. That takes us to 78 points, but it's more who we've beaten. We've beaten Celtic and we've beaten Rangers to get these 11 points. 2 draws against Motherwell, defeat against Hibs, and that win against Falkirk at home. The Deal or No Deal banker is offering you those 11 points right now with those exact set of fixtures. Scott McIntosh, will you accept or will you reject the banker's offer?
So I think I'd need to say no deal to that. One of the reasons is because of how the fixtures are playing out, and we play Celtic on the last day of the season. I think, let's say our next 3 fixtures were Falkirk, Celtic, and Rangers. You could get 9 points on the board and give yourself a bit of daylight and maybe knock the stuffing out of Rangers and Celtic. You'd maybe think, okay, that might be enough. But I think the way the fixtures have panned out, I think we need to win on Saturday, and I think we need to win at Easter Road as well. I think we do need to win the next 2 games and then see where that leaves us going into the Rangers match in terms of how Rangers perform in their next 2 matches against. Is it they've got Falkirk and Motherwell, haven't they, in the next 2 games? So I think it's a case of us getting 6 points and then seeing how the other 2 teams fare and then taking it from there. Because I think just now, looking at how the fixtures pan out, I wouldn't be confident that the 11 points would be enough, even although that includes beating Rangers and Celtic. And then they would obviously lose points in some respect when they play each other as well. But aye, I think because Celtic's so far down the line, I'd rather try and get the points on the board as quickly as possible.
I'm with you because I don't think we can go into our second game
Yeah, 2 more
against
draws
Rangers
would just
after the
knock the
split.
momentum properly off us as well.
Well, but if we only draw against Motherwell and then we lose at Easter Road, 1 point from those two
Aye,
games to go into a Rangers
aye,
game,
that would
that's where I think
just
we struggle.
aye.
That's where I think we struggle. So I was thinking about this earlier today, thinking about putting something up on the Scarves Around the Funnel Twitter account. If we and we have to wait until after Falkirk have played Rangers to get the same scores as to what's already happened this season to then work out would that be enough? Excuse me. We need to go into that Rangers game with some momentum. We need to go into the split with momentum, and that means a win against Motherwell. So I'm with you. I would say no deal to that, even though I think there's a chance 78 points might win, depending on what happens in the Old Firm,
Mm.
might win the league. That does nothing for our momentum if it happens the way it happens in that order. So let's take a look at the fixtures. Now, we start at Easter Road. It was always going to be the first game or the second game. Can't shake this cold. Where we play at Easter Road. It was always going to be the third game where Celtic play Rangers. So Hibs away, Rangers at home, Motherwell away, Falkirk at home, Celtic away. If I was to say to you prior to 1 o'clock today when the fixtures were released, do your own fixtures, they probably wouldn't have been like that. Have we got a rub of the green? Have we been unfortunate? What have those fixtures done for Hearts' chances and the order that they are in?
I don't think that's a bad running order for us. I really don't. I think having Celtic at the end, albeit we might revise this a few weeks down the line if we actually need a result then, but I think the hope is that you can try and get something, or the hope is that Celtic are out the equation by then. Because if we had to go into the last day of the season knowing we needed a win, but it wasn't Celtic that we were fighting with, it was Rangers, then being away to Celtic's a decent fixture to have. So I think the way the fixtures have ran out are fine. I don't think there was ever going to be a good time to get Hibs, because I think Hibs are going to be up for this regardless of whether they're fighting for fourth or just viewing it as a little personal cup final for them. So I think whenever you get Hibs, it was never going to be ideal, and they'll certainly be up for that. I think Falkirk and Motherwell are games that we should be looking to win, as is the Motherwell and Hibs games coming up as well. And then Rangers again, it just sort of depends where we're both sitting at by the time we play them. If we're still ahead of them, then that puts a lot of pressure on them. One, and look, I bet you this is down to just using football fans' prerogative and just wanting to change the goalposts. We all agree that we would have preferred a buffer of points between us and the old firm going into the split, but that's not going to happen now. So how do we try and turn that into a positive? Well, I suppose one way is we know that we need to go into every game probably needing to win the majority of them. If we'd had a 6 point buffer, do the team and the manager start playing safe and playing for a point here and a point there, especially when we play Rangers or Celtic? So that it takes away a little bit of that jeopardy in terms of trying to figure out what we need to do. So that's a potential positive. Like I say, fans' prerogative to move the goalposts, because I think we'd all agree that we'd rather have the points on the board and be way ahead of them. But when that doesn't happen, you've just got to try and spin it into how it can still work out well for us over the coming weeks.
You're never going to satisfy everyone all the time with the fixtures. You're going to get people that are going to be pissed off. Oh, Hearts have got to go to Celtic on the last day. They're only going to have 600 fans. Well, if Rangers had come to Tynecastle, they would have had 600.
Aye,
They've only going to have
we've
750
got to
at
accept this is how
Falkirk.
we're treating away fans. Like,
Yeah,
you've just got to accept that's just part of it. And let's be honest, for 99% of the fixtures over the last 25 years at Parkhead, 900 tickets has been more than fine. So you've got to accept that that's just part of the game. I would prefer it that when Hearts, if Hearts win the league, that they do it in front of as big a Hearts crowd as possible. So it's not going to be Easter Road because that's too early on in the run. So you're looking at it now being, can we maybe try and do it away at Motherwell where we can get a full stand, or at home to Falkirk where we've got a full Tynecastle. That would be the dream. But let's face it, we're in a situation just now where we can't be overly picky. If it has to be Parkhead in front of 900 Hearts fans plus however managed to maybe sneak their way into hospitality that weekend, then so be it. I'm sure Hearts fans will be packing out the pubs along Gorgie Road and enjoying themselves anyway. So yeah, just got to get on with it now and just accept the limitations. The good thing is we've not got Falkirk away, because again that would have been another fixture where you're looking at 600 tickets. So it's a positive that we're at least playing away to Motherwell and Hibs where we get decent allocations.
given Celtic's fixtures, they've got St Mirren at home this weekend, then Falkirk at home, Hibs away, then Rangers at home, Motherwell away, Hearts at home. I think it's probably unlikely now with them getting the win at Dundee that they won't have anything to play for in the final weekend. I'd love that to be the case.
I'm not convinced. I'm
Neither am
still
I,
not
but I'm just
convinced.
looking at those fixtures and I'm saying
I still think
if
Rangers are the ones we've got to watch out for. Because I still think they're the ones that are most likely to build up a bit of a heady steam
but I
and,
think we'll
and,
beat
and
them at
maintain a bit of
Tynecastle.
consistency. Yeah,
I
yeah,
think we'll
that's
beat them at
true. But
Tynecastle, and then they have to go to Celtic Park. It's fascinating the way it's fallen. The point I wanted to make, if for some reason Celtic are not in contention on the final day against Hearts, and we've only what's our allocation for Celtic Park
but
these days?
900.
900. Okay,
Aye.
how many Hearts fans? Celtic fans won't give a fuck, right? They will not want to be there. They've got no interest. If they can't win the title, then
No.
they'll not want Rangers to win the title. They'll want Celtic to lose that game. But how many of those fans, if they offered Hearts supporters tickets for the home end, right, on the QT, would you, I know you can't speak for other fans, but if you can't get one of the 900, would you take a ticket from a Celtic fan for nothing to go to that game if you were offered it? If Celtic were out of it and Hearts could win the title.
I don't know. I think if I'd be able to
Wow.
keep my mouth shut.
But you wouldn't be the only one. And
I
most
know, but
Celtic fans would be cheering Hearts goals anyway.
look, I've seen how the stewards and police deal with us in our own part of the ground, let alone finding us sitting in enemy territory. So, I think given the experience I've had going through to Parkhead in the past, I'll probably have to say I'll just find a seat in the tiny arms and watch it on the telly. But look, I totally understand why some fans would maybe think of it. Like I say, hospitality is maybe a route that some might decide to try and go through. But again, it's going to depend on whether Celtic have an interest. This is, I mean, as far as I'm aware, the day trippers for Celtic are in that section next to us, or at least they used to be. I don't know if that's still the case because they obviously cut down Rangers allocation. But back in the day when Rangers used to get 7,000 tickets, non-season holders at Parkhead used to be in the sections next to us, the day trippers. So, aye, it's would there be the facility there for more tickets? I don't know. I still think the way Celtic operate, they wouldn't give us it, even if it was logistically possible. I just think I mean, their board hate their own fans, let alone anyone else's. So I don't think they'd be bending over backwards to kind of accustom us. So I think we probably just need to accept that if it comes to that, there's just going to be a select few that are going to be lucky enough or unlucky enough to go through to that fixture. Because I mean, the anxiety that'd be going through Hearts fans that day would be something else. But it
We'd
would
have nine.
exercise a few ghosts if we managed
Well,
to
it
win.
would. It would. We'd have 900 fans wearing maroon and 59,100 other fans wanting us to do well in that stadium if Celtic are out of it. If they're
I think
not,
a
it's
lot of Celtic fans just wouldn't turn up because
that's what, yeah, that's the
as
point I'm
much
making
as they'd
about
want
if a
Celtic to
ticket was
get
free.
beat, they would take no joy in
And
watching
anyone,
us
yeah,
be
of
the team to
course.
do it because after Rangers, we're the next down in that ladder of evil for Celtic fans. So I think the crowd would be it'd be back to the Ronnie Dyla days where they'd be shutting down the top tier again that they claim they never done, even although there's all those fucking photos.
Can you can you imagine the only people in the home end that day are the Green Brigade who've come
Aye.
in
They've been
disguise?
invited back for that game.
What was your phrase there? Because we've already had the horseshoe of death, and you just mentioned something else that, honest to goodness. Final round of fixtures: Falkirk, Hibs, Motherwell, Hearts, Celtic. Not Celtic Rangers. Sorry, that is week 36. Final round of fixtures: Celtic, Hearts, Falkirk, Rangers, Hibs against Motherwell. Try to think if we've had any previous history of going to Celtic Park on Saturday, the 16th of May. What's your YouTube account called?
Aye, good memories of that date. Uh,
Amoruso lets it run, huh?
as you pointed out, though, Celtic get to play Hibs on the 40th anniversary, 86. So I wouldn't be expecting any fucking favours for that lot on that day. Although it's worked out pretty well with Motherwell having a slump in form because it's actually given Hibs a little bit more to play for over the coming weeks. I think most Hibs fans had accepted that they were maybe going to play for fifth and maybe have, the game against us being the sort of the big season finale. So I think the fact that Motherwell have dropped off a little bit, it'll hopefully give Hibs that bit of an incentive to try and claim fourth spot. So it gives them something to play for as well. Falkirk will just do what they always do. Like they don't have any other way of playing. So I'm quite confident that they'll go out there quite carefree and just play their own game and that they'll be hard work for everyone that comes up against them. Motherwell, bit of a tricky one. It's hard to say what's going to happen with them now. They seem to have lost a little bit of confidence. But again, given their style of play, you could still see it gelling together. Maybe not over the course of 6 games, but in one or two matches. So they're still going to be an interesting team to keep out for as well, which is why I just think, I just can't see where a team wins 5 or 6 of these fixtures, eh? I just
No,
don't see it.
it ain't
Uh,
happening.
I'd be very surprised if that happens. But I think if there is a competitor to us for that, I still think it's Rangers more than Celtic. I still think Celtic are just getting there by the skin of their teeth now. Like I didn't watch the whole game because I was coming back through for Livingston, but I managed to catch the last sort of half an hour. The Dundee Celtic game,
Rangers and
and I
Celtic defences are awful.
wasn't impressed. Well, I'm hoping Rangers continue to play John Souttar because if you look at the
Oof,
stats, say the last
bonkers.
6 or 7 games he's played in, they've lost at least 2 goals in each of those
Mhm.
fixtures. So I'm hoping they continue with him. I noticed they had Fernandez on the bench against United, but I'd imagine they'll bring him back in. But hopefully not. And obviously they'll miss Romans. I think still out for another game. I think he'll be missing this weekend, and he's obviously been a quite a find for them in January as well. So who knows? Still might be one or two little knocks to players that still might happen over the coming weeks. Obviously, Celtic thought there was an outside chance of getting Alistair Johnston back, and then he's broken down again, and he's now out for the rest of the season. So that's the thing. There's still all these unknowns that could still come into the equation over the coming weeks as well. We've hopefully, touch wood, we've hopefully had our fair share of the injuries, and hopefully that'll be us now. You know, we can get Finlay back in the next week or two, get Milne back after the Motherwell game as well, and I think that'll help. I think one of the things I hope Hearts fans have appreciated over the last couple of weeks is how big I miss Stuart Finlay is. I know he had a bit of a run of games over a 4 or 5 game stretch where he was responsible for a cluster of goals, being a little bit too casual. But his pace is a huge miss because it covers for our left back quite a lot, and having him and Halkett allows us to push forward and have that intent. McCart's not a bad centre half. He's a decent enough deputy, but he just doesn't have that recovery pace that Finlay has. So I think getting Finlay and Milne back in the team would be a huge plus.
I'm going to end the post-split fixture chat with a tweet from DIGB, who's a Rangers fan, on Twitter. Split fixture discourse is daft. Winners win and losers find excuses. The order and kick-off times don't matter. Win your games of football and you win the league. The weird thing is, the point at Livingston, if we win the league by a point, might be the point that got us there. We can't pick and choose. We can't revisit history if others don't get the chance to do so as well. It's in our hands. We're 1 point clear at the top. And if we win all our games, we win the league. Sounds simple. In essence, it might be slightly harder to do so. But there's a lot of other teams that would swap everything they have to be where we are right now. You're listening to Scarves Around the Funnel, sponsored by Forrest Hepburn and McDonald Signs, who've been offering creative sign and print solutions since the 1950s. We wrap up today's episode by previewing Motherwell at home this weekend. We were happy with a 4-4-2 at the weekend at Livingston, but we didn't get the ball quick enough to the wide players that we wanted to play. And as a result, we're hemmed in the middle where they had more numbers, more bodies, and it was just a shit show in the last half hour. That's done. We can't change that. We can affect what happens this weekend. So, Mr. McIntosh, the 4-4-2 is certainly an option. You've spoken about that. 4-2-4. If that's something you go with, I'm interested to find out who you're playing at right midfield. We've also spoken in our WhatsApp group with Laurie and Ryan about the potential of maybe a 4-3-3 now. What are you doing as far as the team is concerned and the formation for Motherwell's visit to Tynecastle on Saturday?
Yeah, it's a bit of a funny one. I think if you go sort of 4-2-4, you're then probably going to have to ask Shanklin to maybe drop in a bit and sort of sit in on Water Fadinger, and then you're asking maybe Devlin to play the second presser for midfield. So I get why there's probably chat about a 4-3-3. I suppose it's just what personnel you pick. Again, if Magnuson's there, he would be the obvious choice. Do you bring Altena in at right back and push McAtee into an advanced role? Again, Blair Spittle is somebody who I think performed that role really well recently at home to Aberdeen in terms of pressing from the front. It's a difficult one. I mean, you could still go with the 4-2-4 and you could bring Spittle into the team and switch Kazidis over onto the right. So there's an option to do that. Maybe try and encourage Kazidis to hit the byline a little bit more. You've then got Spittle playing a bit more inverted, but then hopefully having Kingsley providing that option going down the flank as well. So I'd still be tempted to try and get as many attacking players on the pitch as possible. Because I think ultimately what you need to do against Motherwell, regardless of formation, is you need to make sure you make life as difficult for them as possible from the back. So, because their style of play isn't going to change. You know, they're very much wedded into that system and that way of playing. So I think what we've got to do is make sure we've got enough players on the park that can win the ball in the right area and then influence things for us positively going forward as well. So at this stage, I'd be inclined to obviously get Berry back in the team for Leonard, and then it would be probably a case of I would be tempted to bring Blair Spittle in and switch Kazarides over onto the right. Chesnikov's he's a peculiar player. He gets stuck in. You can see that in terms of the role he has for the first goal that we score, in terms of winning the ball back for us. I think he can be aggressive when he needs to be, but at the same time he switches off a lot. And there was two or three instances on Sunday where he just completely switched off and let the left-sided player just run right past him. Uh, so I'm a little bit concerned about him from a sort of mentality standpoint more than anything. I think he does put the work in, but he still is prone to lapses of concentration. So I'd be tempted to get Kizadidis over on the right and maybe bring Spittle into the team and play him over on the left. That would be my what I'd like to see. Whether that's what we will see is another thing entirely, because you never know with mechanics. But I don't think you'll see too many changes for Sunday. It'll just be maybe a couple at the most.
What are we going to get from Motherwell this weekend? They've lost three of their last four, and they haven't won since the end of February.
I don't know. I don't know what you'll get for them. I mean, yeah, I know what their intent will be because that hasn't changed all season, but they really have lost. Well, there's two things that have sort of come in at the same time into play. They've lost confidence, but they've also encouraged other teams to get confidence playing against them as well. So they've lost that aura that I think they had around sort of January, February time. If you think back to when they beat Celtic and they beat Hibs and they got a draw against Rangers and that, I think the vibe was that Motherwell with the football inside and this would just continue until the end of the season. Whereas now they've lost that aura. Bertolascu seems to now be getting quite frustrated with trivial matters. His post-match, whereas when they were winning, his post-match interviews could be seen as, oh well, it's fine, he can say whatever he wants because they're winning. Now people are now thinking, these post-match interviews are a little bit off in terms of some of the stuff he decides to prioritise and talk about. So aye, it's interesting. I still do think there'll be a couple of games over the coming weeks where they do click again, but I don't think it's going to be consistent over 6 games. I'd be inclined to say just now, if somebody was to put a gun to my head, Hibs will probably now pip them to fourth because I think Hibs will possibly get more points on the board between now and the end of the season. Uh, so I think Motherwell, it's a strange one, and I'm hoping they'll do us a turn when it comes to the split. But as for Saturday, I think if we approach it in the right manner in terms of getting our press right, because that's what we got wrong for 60 minutes at Tynecastle. The press was we started with Wilson and Shankland that day. We just didn't get the press right from the forward line, and we were half a second off for the first 60 minutes. We brought Spittle and Braga on, and that made a huge difference to us that day. So I'm quite confident we'll have learned lessons for that day, and we should be able to turn them over on Saturday.
They've not beaten us this season. We've not beaten them
No,
this season. And I think having watched the highlights of Hibs going there to Fir Park recently, Hibs didn't set up like they were going to have a goal, but they made sure that they wanted the goalkeeper to get the majority of the ball and the
yeah.
two centre backs not to get as much of the ball. They set up really well that day, Hibs, but they didn't really have any focal point in attack on the counter. So you've spoken about the
That's
press
why I
against
would
Motherwell.
rather, because obviously when Hibs do it with the wing backs coming from a
Yeah.
deeper area. But the problem is when they turn the ball over, they've only really got two attacking outlets at that stage. That's why I'd like to see us stick with the 4-2-4 so that we can win the ball just as high up the park as what Hibs done. There's just a bit more of a range of options there in terms of being able to turn over and then hopefully punish them.
Predictions. They're without Slattery, who serves the second game of his ban. What are you going for score-wise and a Hearts goal scorer, please?
I'm going to say 3-1 Hearts. I think we will come out the traps flying. We'll be a couple of goals up at half time. We'll do what Hearts do, which is we'll give a soft goal away. We'll not make it easy for ourselves, but then we'll get another late goal just to sort of wrap it up. I'm going to say 3-1 Hearts, and I think Shankland will get another goal.
Okay, I'm off the 1-0 train. I think we have to be as well. I'd take it. Don't get me wrong, I'd take it right now. But I don't think we can approach a game like that. Every game for me now is a cup final. Every game is a must-win game. If we can go into the Hibs game on the back of a win over Motherwell, if we can go into the Rangers game on the back of a win against Motherwell and a win against Hibs at Easter Road, we need momentum from somewhere. The cautious nature of our play at home, even although it's being controlled, I think there has to be more of a kind of swashbuckling nature to try and get goals. Not for the goal difference. That'll take care of itself. If we lose the title and goal difference, then we can identify whichever games that we had. The game against Aberdeen is probably the most recent one. The game
We've
against
not got a group of
Livingston.
players that are good enough to control the tempo against Motherwell
No,
either.
I
We're
don't
better
think
letting
so.
them have the ball in their half and then turning it over and just doing what we can with the possession we get. If we try and control the game, that's where we just come a cropper because we just it's not that the again, it always sounds like you're belittling players when you talk, but we're just not set up to be that sort of team. It's just not the team that McInnes has built. So therefore, when we try and do it, we just don't look good enough compared to other sides. And to be honest, very few sides in Scotland just now are good with controlled possession. Motherwell are one of the few. They're the exception to the rule. Hibs are better when they're turning the ball over. Celtic are better under Martin O'Neill when they're turning the ball over. Rangers certainly are. So even the top teams in the league just now that are up there with us, Motherwell and Falkirk are the only two in that top six where you say they're happy to have the ball and they're also
Hmm.
very good at it. The other four teams aren't. The other four teams, it's almost like, it's it's like underdog football that the other teams are sort of getting involved in. So if we try and approach it the way we have done recently, I wouldn't like to see that. I just think, and again, it just brings that sense of anxiety into the stands. I think you need a performance similar to what we had against Aberdeen, where albeit it was a 1-0, I think the
No, Aberdeen
intent
was
was
good.
there.
Yes.
The intent was there to make life difficult for them for the start, and I think we need to see a repeat of that on Saturday.
That was actually one of the two words I was going to use, intent and physicality.
Mm.
I think those are the two things that we need this weekend. We need pace. We need to get in their faces. I'm really looking forward to Kiziridis against O'Donnell. And if we can win that battle, then we've got a right chance. If we try and play them at football, I think they're a better footballing side than us. If we stand off them and don't get the press right, we must have learned our lessons. We have to have learned from what we didn't do right in the last half hour at Livingston. Hearts 2, Motherwell 1, Claudio Braga will be the hero. And we will go into the split, certainly with the lead. We will be Falkirk fans on, is it Sunday
Yes,
that they play against
Falkirk
Rangers?
are
Because
against
Celtic will
Rangers
beat
on
St Mirren.
Sunday.
Celtic will beat St Mirren. That is the same time as us, I believe. So Aberdeen Hibs, Celtic St Mirren, Hearts Motherwell, and Dundee United Livy and Kilmarnock Dundee are all on Saturday at 3 o'clock. So fingers crossed, we still have a 3 point lead over Celtic, and fingers crossed that it's not Rangers who are chasing us as our direct competitors because they slip up at Falkirk on Sunday. It's the final game before the split. There's plenty more twists and turns still to come. Hearts are top of the table by 1 point. We all would have taken this at the start of the season if we were offered this exact scenario come mid-April. For now, it's a case of just going and winning the fucking thing. Bye for now.